The sky above Valanthos Prime burned with the light of 1,000 enemy ships, and Queen Cirith stood alone on the broken balcony of her ancient palace, watching her world die piece by piece. She was tall and slender like all Velanari, with skin the color of pale moonlight and eyes that shimmered like liquid silver. Her people had ruled this world for 10,000 years, building cities of crystal and light, creating art and music that other species traveled across galaxies to witness. They were not warriors by nature, preferring peace and trade and the quiet pursuit of knowledge. But the Kefir Dominion cared nothing for art or peace or beauty. The Kefir were conquerors, plain and simple. Their massive insectoid forms stood twice the height of any Velanari, covered in black chitinous armor that could stop most weapons. They had swept across dozens of star systems in the past century, enslaving some species, harvesting others for food, and simply exterminating those who resisted too strongly. Now they had come to Valanthos Prime, and they had brought an armada that blotted out the stars themselves. 3,000 warships hung in orbit above her dying world. 3,000 vessels of death and destruction, each one bristling with weapons capable of turning entire cities to ash. Her own fleet had numbered only 400 ships, and they had fought bravely for the first week of the invasion. Now they were nothing but scattered debris floating in the void, their crews dead, their sacrifice meaning nothing against such overwhelming force. Queen Cirith gripped the broken railing of her balcony and felt despair threatening to swallow her whole. 6 weeks. For 6 terrible weeks, the siege had strangled her planet. The Kefir had destroyed every orbital station, every satellite, every means of communication with the outside galaxy. They had bombarded military installations and power plants, turning her world's infrastructure to rubble. Food supplies were running critically low. The shield generators that protected the remaining cities flickered and failed more often each day. Her people were starving, dying, losing hope with every passing hour. And the Galactic Assembly did nothing. She had sent desperate pleas to the great powers of the galaxy, begging for intervention, for aid, for anything at all. The consortium of allied worlds had expressed deep concern, but taken no action. The Methrony Republic had offered thoughts and prayers while doing absolutely nothing. The Assembly itself had issued a strongly worded statement condemning the Kefir aggression, as if words alone could stop orbital bombardment. The truth was simple and brutal. No one wanted to fight the Kefir. Their empire was too vast, their fleets too numerous, their reputation too terrifying. The other galactic powers had calculated the cost of intervention and decided that the Velanari simply were not worth the risk. Her people would die, and the galaxy would watch and do nothing. General Corvin appeared behind her, his military uniform torn and stained with dust from the latest bombing. He was old, seasoned, loyal beyond question, but even he could not hide the defeat in his eyes. "My queen," he said quietly, "the council has gathered. They wish to discuss terms of surrender." Cirith did not turn around. She continued staring at the burning sky, watching another section of her orbital defense network explode in a bloom of silent fire. "What terms would the Kefir offer us?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Unconditional submission. Our population would be divided half for labor camps, half for the harvesting facilities. Our world would be stripped of resources and then abandoned. Our culture, our history, our very identity would be erased." "That is not surrender," Cirith said softly. "That is extinction with extra steps." "Yes, my queen. But some believe that a portion of our people surviving in slavery is better than all of us dying in defiance." She finally turned to face him, and her silver eyes blazed with cold fire. "Do you believe that, General?" Corvin straightened his spine despite his exhaustion. "No, my queen. I would rather die free than live as cattle for those monsters. But I am a soldier. The choice is not mine to make." Sirith walked past him into her ruined throne room. The beautiful crystal ceiling had been shattered by a near-miss bombardment, and moonlight poured through the gaps like silver tears. She sat upon her throne, a seat her grandmother had occupied, and her grandmother's grandmother before her, as she thought about impossible choices. Surrender meant slow death. Resistance meant fast death. Neither option allowed her people to survive with any dignity or hope, unless she did something forbidden. Her chief advisor, Torvan, waited in the shadows. He was ancient by Velinari standards, his pale skin wrinkled and his silver eyes dimmed by age. But his mind remained sharp as ever. "You are thinking of the quarantine channels," he said. It was not a question. Sirith nodded slowly. The assembly forbade all contact with them. They said the species was too dangerous, too unpredictable, too violent to be trusted. "The humans," Torvan whispered, and the words seemed to echo in the ruined chamber. Everyone in the galaxy had heard of the humans. They were a young species from a small planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. By galactic standards, they should have been nothing primitive, isolated, barely capable of interstellar travel. But something had gone terribly wrong when the Kethver had first encountered them. The stories varied depending on who told them. Some said the humans had destroyed an entire Kethver invasion fleet with weapons that bent the laws of physics. Others claimed they had tracked Kethver raiders across 4 star systems and eliminated them to the last warrior. The Galactic Assembly had studied the reports and decided that humanity was simply too dangerous to be allowed into civilized space. They had been quarantined, isolated, warned never to expand beyond their own small corner of the galaxy. "The Assembly says they are monsters," General Corvin said nervously. "They say humans are violent and irrational and impossible to predict." "The Kethver are also monsters," Sirith replied. "At least the humans have never conquered peaceful worlds or harvested sentient beings for food." "We do not know that for certain, my queen." "No, we do not know anything for certain." She rose from her throne and walked to the communication console that still barely functioned. "But I know this. We are going to die. My people are going to be enslaved and butchered and forgotten. The civilized galaxy has abandoned us. So I will reach out to the uncivilized." Torvan stepped forward. "The quarantine channels are still functional. The signal would reach human space within hours. But my queen, even if they receive our message, why would they help us? We have nothing to offer them. We have no strategic value, no rare resources, nothing they could not find elsewhere." "I do not know why they might help," Sirith admitted. "Perhaps they will ignore us. Perhaps they will laugh at our desperation. But I would rather die knowing I tried everything than surrender knowing I left one option unexplored." She activated the console and began to record her message. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger as she spoke. "This is Queen Sirith of the Velinari Sovereignty. My world is under siege by the Kethver Dominion. My fleet is destroyed. My people are dying, and no one in the galaxy will help us. I am broadcasting this message on all frequencies, including those forbidden by the Galactic Assembly. If anyone is listening, if the humans are listening, I beg you for aid. We cannot offer you wealth or power or alliance. We can only offer our gratitude and our friendship. Please, if there is any mercy in your hearts, help us. We are desperate, and we are running out of time." She transmitted the signal and watched it disappear into the void. The silence that followed seemed to stretch into eternity. Above her, the Kethver fleet continued its slow, methodical destruction of everything she loved. Around her, her advisors and generals waited for hope that might never come. Queen Sirith sat upon her throne and prepared her people to die with whatever dignity remained to them. But somewhere in the cold darkness between stars, her message raced toward a small blue planet, carrying with it the desperate hope of a dying world. Whether anyone would answer remained to be seen. 3 weeks passed after Queen Sirith sent her desperate message into the void, and no answer came. The siege grew worse with each passing day. The Kethver tightened their grip around Valanthos Prime like a massive claw squeezing the life from prey. Orbital bombardments increased in frequency and intensity. Another 2 cities fell, their crystal spires reduced to molten slag, their populations either killed in the attacks or driven underground into already overcrowded bunkers. Food had become more precious than gold. The agricultural districts had been deliberately targeted early in the siege, and the stored supplies were nearly exhausted. Sirith had ordered strict rationing, but even with the most careful distribution, her people were slowly starving. Children cried from hunger. The elderly quietly refused their portions so the young might live a little longer. Disease began spreading through the cramped underground shelters. And still, no one came to help. The Galactic Assembly issued another statement, this one urging all parties to seek a peaceful resolution. Sirith wanted to scream at the hypocrisy. There could be no peaceful resolution with the Kethvor. They did not negotiate, did not compromise, did not show mercy. They conquered, they harvested, they moved on to the next target. Everyone knew this, and yet the civilized galaxy continued to pretend that diplomacy might somehow save her people. Queen Sirith spent her days walking through the underground bunkers, offering what comfort she could to her suffering people. She held the hands of the dying, sang lullabies to frightened children, and listened to the prayers of those who still believed salvation might come. She refused to hide in safety while her subjects suffered, even when her guards begged her to stay protected. If I am to ask my people to endure this nightmare, she told General Corvin, then I must endure it beside them. At night, she sat alone in a small chamber deep beneath the palace and allowed herself to weep. The weight of leadership had never felt so crushing. Every death was her failure. Every starving child was her responsibility. She had sent that message to the humans weeks ago, and the silence from the stars felt like a final rejection. Perhaps the Assembly had been right. Perhaps the humans were simply monsters who cared nothing for the suffering of others. Or perhaps they had never received her message at all. Either way, hope was dying. On the 22nd day after her transmission, old Torvan came to her private chamber with a troubled expression on his ancient face. "My queen," he said softly, "you asked me to research everything we know about the humans. I have spent many nights studying the old records, the classified reports, the testimonies of the few who have encountered them. I believe you should hear what I have learned." Sirith gestured for him to sit. "Tell me, old friend." At this point, knowledge is one of the few things we have left. Torvan settled into a chair with a weary sigh. The humans are not what the Assembly says they are. Or rather, they are not only what the Assembly says. The truth is far more complicated. Explain. 60 years ago, the Kethver sent a raiding fleet to the human home system. They expected easy prey, a primitive species barely capable of defending their own planet. What they found instead was something that terrified them. The humans fought back? Yes, but that is not what frightened the Kethver. Torvan leaned forward. Many species fight back. The Velinari fought back. The difference is what happened after the battle. When the humans defeated the raiding fleet, they did not celebrate their victory and return to their lives. They did not send diplomatic protests or demand reparations. Instead, they gathered every ship they had and they pursued the surviving Kethver vessels. Sirith frowned. Pursued them? How far? Across 4 star systems, my queen. The humans chased those Kethver ships for months, never stopping, never resting, never showing any sign of giving up. One by one, they hunted down every single raider and destroyed them. By the end, the Kethver had lost 47 ships, and the humans had lost only 3. That sounds like efficiency, not madness. Ah, but here is the part that disturbed the assembly. Tovan's voice dropped lower. The humans did not stop at destroying the ships. When the final Kethver vessel was disabled and its crew attempted to surrender, the humans boarded the ship. They took recordings from the Kethver computers, and what they found were images and videos of the harvesting process. Kethver soldiers butchering human civilians during the initial raid. Sirith felt a chill run down her spine. What did the humans do? They executed every single Kethver on that ship. Then they transmitted a message to the Kethver Dominion. The message was simple. Touch our people again, and we will burn your empire to ash. And my queen, here is the terrifying part. The Kethver believed them. The greatest military power in 3 galaxies looked at this tiny, primitive species and decided they were not worth the risk. They've never attacked human space again. Sirith sat in silence for a long moment. So the humans are capable of great violence. Yes, but consider the context. Torvan held up one wrinkled hand. The humans did not attack without reason. They did not conquer peaceful worlds or enslave innocent populations. They responded to an unprovoked attack with overwhelming force, and then they stopped. They returned to their space and bothered no one. Does that sound like madness to you? It sounds like protection, Sirith said slowly. They were protecting their own people. Exactly. And that is why the Assembly fears them. Torvan shook his head sadly. The civilized galaxy operates on calculations, cost versus benefit, risk versus reward. The great powers allow the Kethver to conquer because fighting them would be expensive. But the humans do not seem to calculate that way. They respond to threats with a fury that ignores rational cost analysis. That unpredictability terrifies the Assembly more than the Kethver ever could. But if the humans only protect their own, Sirith said, then why would they help us? We are strangers. We have no connection to them. Torvan was quiet for a moment. I do not know, my queen. The records I found suggest that humans have a strange concept they call empathy. They feel the suffering of others, even strangers, even enemies. Some human philosophers argue that this trait makes them weak. Others argue it makes them strong. Perhaps that is why they might answer your call, not because of strategy or profit, but simply because you asked. That seems almost too simple to believe. Many things about humans seem too simple to believe. They are a contradiction wrapped in mystery, violent yet compassionate, primitive yet innovative, selfish yet capable of extraordinary sacrifice for others. Torvan smiled faintly. Perhaps that is why the galaxy does not know what to do with them. Before Sirith could respond, the ground shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling, and warning alarms began screaming throughout the bunker. General Corvin burst through the door, his face pale with fear. My queen! The Kethver are beginning their ground assault. They have started landing troops in the outer districts. Sirith rose to her feet, her heart pounding. How many? Thousands already, with more dropships coming every minute. Our remaining defense forces are engaging them, but we are badly outnumbered. At this rate, they will reach the palace bunkers within 48 hours. This was it then. The final chapter of the Velinari sovereignty. The Kethver had grown tired of waiting and decided to end the siege by force. Gather all remaining military units, Sirith commanded. We will make them pay for every meter of ground. If we must die, we will die fighting. Corvin saluted and rushed away to organize the defense. Torvan remained behind, his old eyes filled with sorrow. I am sorry, my queen. I had hoped the humans might answer. As did I, old friend. Sirith looked up at the ceiling, imagining the stars beyond. But perhaps some hopes are simply too beautiful to come true. She turned to leave, to join her soldiers in the final battle, when Torvan suddenly grabbed her arm. His eyes had gone wide, fixed on a small communication device he carried. "My queen," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Something is happening. Our deep space sensors, the few that still function, they are detecting something at the edge of the system. More HFY reinforcements? No." Tovan's hand shook as he read the data. "These signatures are different. The ships are coming through subspace rifts, not standard hyperspace lanes. That should be impossible. The energy required would destroy any known vessel." Sirith felt something stirring in her chest, something she had almost forgotten how to feel. "Who are they? Can you identify them?" Tovan looked up at her with tears streaming down his ancient face. "They are broadcasting on the quarantine frequency, my queen. They are broadcasting a response to your message." "What does it say?" The old advisor read the words aloud, and Queen Sirith felt her legs go weak beneath her. "We received your distress call, Valanthos Prime. Sit tight. Help is on the way." Somewhere in the cold void of space, impossible ships were tearing holes in reality itself, racing toward her dying world. The humans had answered. High Commander Vresel of the HFY Dominion stood upon the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Hunger, and watched with satisfaction as his ground forces swept across the surface of Valanthos Prime. He was a massive creature, even by HFY standards. His black chitinous armor gleamed under the harsh bridge lights, and his 4 compound eyes reflected the tactical displays showing his inevitable victory. He had commanded 17 successful planetary conquests, and this one would be the easiest yet. The Velinari were soft, weak, pathetic. They had no real military tradition, no warrior culture, no stomach for the brutal realities of war. Their little fleet had been amusing to destroy, and their ground forces were being swept aside like insects before a flame. Within 2 days, he would have their queen in chains, and the harvesting could begin. "Commander," his sensor officer reported, "the ground assault is proceeding ahead of schedule. We have captured 3 major population centers and are advancing on the capital region." "Excellent." Rexal clicked his mandibles in pleasure. "Inform the harvesting ships to prepare their equipment. I want processing to begin immediately after resistance collapses." "Yes, Commander." Rexal allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. His superiors had grown impatient with the length of this siege, but he had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Now the Velinari defenses were exhausted, their hope destroyed, their spirit broken. The conquest would be complete, and he would return home a hero. That was when the alarms began screaming. Every warning system on the Eternal Hunger activated simultaneously. Red lights flashed across the bridge, and his officers scrambled to their stations with panic chittering. Rexal felt a cold sensation that he rarely experienced, the first stirrings of fear. "Report," he bellowed. "What is happening?" The sensor officer's voice trembled. "Commander, we are detecting faster-than-light signatures at the system's edge. But this is impossible. They are not using hyperspace lanes. They are tearing through subspace itself. That technology does not exist. No species can survive subspace transition without proper jump points. Commander, I am showing 112 vessels emerging from the rifts. They are broadcasting no identification codes. They match no known configurations in our database." Rexal stormed to the sensor station and shoved his officer aside. He stared at the readings, his compound eyes struggling to process what he was seeing. The ships that had appeared were ugly, angular things, black holes covered with weapons that his computers could not even classify. They moved with a speed and precision that seemed almost reckless. And they were heading directly toward his fleet. "Hail them," Rexal commanded. "Demand identification and purpose." The communications officer worked frantically. "Commander, they are not responding to any standard frequencies." "Wait, They are transmitting something. A voice crackled over the bridge speakers, speaking in accented galactic common. The voice was calm, almost casual, as if discussing the weather rather than entering a war zone. Attention HFY vessels. This is Admiral Kira Vance of the United Earth Emergency Response Fleet. We have received a distress call from Valantos Prime and are responding under humanitarian protocols. You have two options. Withdraw your forces from this system immediately, or face the consequences. You have 5 minutes to decide. Rexall stared at the speakers in disbelief. Then he began to laugh, a harsh, clicking sound that echoed across the bridge. Humans, he spat. These are the legendary humans. 100 ships against 3,000. This is a joke. They must be insane. His officers exchanged nervous glances. They had all heard the stories about the humans, how they had humiliated HFY forces decades ago, how they had pursued raiders across 4 systems, how they had made the Dominion itself back down. But those were just stories, surely exaggerated by time and fear. Commander, the center officer said hesitantly, their weapon systems are powering up. They show no signs of slowing down. Let them come. Rexall snarled. They are outnumbered 30-1. They will learn what happens when you challenge the HFY Dominion. All ships, engage the intruders. Crush them quickly and return to the conquest. The massive HFY fleet began to turn, bringing thousands of weapons to bear on the tiny human formation. Rexall watched with anticipation, eager to see these foolish primitives destroyed. The human ships did not slow down. They accelerated toward the HFY armada, their formation spreading out like the fingers of a grasping hand. And then they began firing. Rexall had expected energy weapons, perhaps missiles, the standard armaments of most civilized species. What he saw instead made his blood run cold. The human ships were launching objects at incredible velocities, solid projectiles, accelerated to speeds approaching light itself. The first volley crossed the gap between the fleets in seconds, too fast for any defensive system to track. 3 HFY cruisers simply ceased to exist, their hulls shattered by impacts that release more energy than nuclear explosions. What are those weapons? Rexall screamed. What is happening? Before anyone could answer, a second volley struck. This time, the humans targeted the larger vessels, his carriers, his dreadnoughts, the backbone of his fleet. The kinetic projectiles punched through shields and armor as if they were paper. Explosions bloomed across his formation like flowers of fire. The human ships were closing fast now, and they deployed new horrors. Small pods rocketed from their hulls, moving far too quickly to intercept. These pods did not explode. They attached themselves to HFY vessels and began burning through the armor. Boarding parties. A terrified officer shouted. Commander, they are sending boarding parties. That is madness. No one boards ships in the middle of combat. But the humans were doing exactly that. Reports flooded in from across the fleet, human soldiers cutting through hulls, fighting their way through corridors, overwhelming HFY warriors with impossible ferocity. These were not the soft, fragile creatures the stories described. These were armored nightmares, moving with terrifying speed and absolute ruthlessness. Rexall watched in horror as his perfect formation collapsed into chaos. His ships were exploding, being boarded, retreating in panic. The human fleet moved through his forces like predators through a herd, striking and moving and striking again. Commander, we have lost 400 vessels in the first hour of engagement. They have not lost a single ship. That is impossible. Commander, the destroyer group on our left flank is being overwhelmed. The carrier-devouring swarm has been boarded and taken. Our ground forces are reporting human atmospheric fighters entering the combat zone. This could not be happening. This was not war. This was slaughter. The humans fought like no species Rexall had ever encountered. They did not follow standard tactics, did not respect conventional doctrine, did not seem to care about acceptable losses. They threw themselves into combat with a fury that bordered on madness, and somehow they kept winning. 6 hours into the battle, Rexall received reports that made his legs go weak. He had lost 800 ships. 800. And still the humans kept coming, kept fighting, kept tearing his fleet apart. "Commander," his second officer said quietly, "we must consider retreat. If this continues, we will lose the entire fleet." "The Dominion does not retreat." Rexall snarled. "We do not run from primitives." "Commander, these are not primitives. Look at the tactical display. They are outmaneuvering us, outfighting us, outsmarting us at every turn. We have never faced anything like this." Another explosion rocked the eternal hunger. Warning lights flashed across every system. A damage report came in. Human boarding pods had attached to the lower decks. "Commander, they are inside the ship." Rexall finally felt true fear. He had heard stories of what happened to Kethver, who fought humans in close combat. The creatures were small, yes, but they were fast and clever and absolutely relentless. They did not surrender, did not hesitate, did not show mercy. "All hands repel boarders," he commanded, and signaled the fleet begin tactical withdrawal. "We will regroup at the system's edge and plan a counterattack." The order spread through what remained of his fleet. One by one, his ships began breaking away from the engagement, fleeing toward the outer reaches of the system. The humans pursued, of course they pursued, but they focused on preventing escape rather than wholesale destruction. As the eternal hunger limped toward safety, Rexall watched his tactical display with hollow eyes. In a single battle, he had lost over half his fleet. The greatest military force in 3 galaxies had been broken by 100 human ships. Somewhere on the surface of Volanthos Prime, the Velinari Queen would be watching the sky, seeing Kethver ships burning like falling stars. The humans had answered her call, and they had changed everything. Rexall began composing a message to the Dominion High Command. They needed to know what had happened here. They needed to understand that the stories about humans were not exaggerated. If anything, they were understated. The galaxy had just shifted beneath their feet, and nothing would ever be the same. Queen Sirith stood in her command bunker, surrounded by generals and advisors, watching the impossible unfold on the tactical displays. The human fleet carved through the Kethver formation like a blade through silk. Every time a Kethver ship exploded, her people cheered, first quietly, then with growing enthusiasm. After weeks of despair and defeat, they were witnessing something they had never dared to imagine. Victory. "My queen," General Corvin said breathlessly, "the Kethver ground forces are retreating. Their dropships are attempting to return to orbit, but the human atmospheric fighters are intercepting them." "How many human fighters are there?" "Our sensors count approximately 300, but they are moving so fast it is difficult to track them." Corvin shook his head in wonder. "These pilots fly like they have no fear of death. They engage targets 3 times their size without hesitation." Sirith watched a group of human fighters descend on a Kethver transport, attempting to flee the surface. The transport was huge, heavily armored, designed to survive anti-aircraft fire. The human fighters swarmed it like angry insects, peppering it with precise strikes until it crashed in a ball of flame. "The Kethver ground forces are surrendering," another officer reported. "Thousands of them are laying down weapons and requesting mercy." "Are the humans accepting surrenders?" "Yes, my queen. They are taking prisoners and directing them to holding areas. They are not executing them." Sirith felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of her wanted the Kethver dead, every single one of them. They had murdered her people, destroyed her cities, caused suffering beyond measure. But another part of her recognized something important in the human choice to accept surrenders. They were not monsters. They were warriors with a code, fighters who could show mercy even to those who showed none. The Galactic Assembly had lied about them, or perhaps simply misunderstood them. The orbital battle continued for 2 more days. The HFY committed everything they had: reserve fleets, command carriers, even their feared Harvester-class juggernauts. But nothing could stop the human advance. The small human fleet fought with a fury and skill that defied all logic. When the HFY finally broke, they fled toward the system's edge in complete disarray. More than 2,000 of their original 3,000 ships had been destroyed or captured. The remainder limped away in scattered groups, pursued by human vessels that seemed determined to ensure none of them would ever return. And then, for the first time in weeks, the skies of Volantos Prime were clear. Cirith walked to the surface entrance of her bunker and stepped outside. The air still smelled of smoke and ash, but the constant thunder of orbital bombardment had fallen silent. Stars were visible again, real stars, not the burning holes of enemy ships. Her people emerged from the bunkers around her, blinking in the pale light of dawn. Many fell to their knees and wept. Others embraced each other, laughing and crying at the same time. Children who had been born underground during the siege looked up at the sky with wonder, seeing it for the first time. They had survived. Against all odds, against all reason, they had survived. A human shuttle descended through the atmosphere, sleek and angular like the warships above. It landed in the courtyard of the ruined palace, and Cirith walked to meet it with Torvan and Corvin at her sides. The shuttle's ramp lowered, and a human stepped out. She was smaller than Cirith had expected, barely reaching the queen's shoulder. Her skin was an interesting brown color, weathered by what looked like scars across her jaw and forehead. Her eyes were dark and calm, filled with an intelligence that seemed to weigh everything they saw. The human wore a military uniform covered in medals and insignia, and she moved with the confident grace of someone accustomed to command. Behind her came 4 soldiers in heavy armor, their faces hidden behind helmets, their weapons held ready but not raised. "Queen Cirith," the human said, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "I am Admiral Kira Vance of the United Earth Emergency Response Fleet. We received your distress call." Cirith felt tears threatening to fall. She had never expected this moment to actually happen, to stand face to face with the mysterious beings who had saved her world. "Admiral Vance," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I do not have words to express my gratitude. You came when no one else would. You fought when the entire galaxy looked away. How can I ever repay such a debt?" Admiral Vance studied her for a moment, then smiled, a surprisingly warm expression on her battle-scarred face. "Your Majesty, we did not come for payment or reward. We came because you asked for help, and helping is what we do. The Galactic Assembly told us you were dangerous. They said you were unpredictable, violent, impossible to trust. They might be right about some of that." Vance chuckled. "We are certainly violent when violence is needed. But dangerous? That depends on your perspective." She stepped closer to Cirith, and her dark eyes grew serious. "The HFY think we are dangerous because we do not play by their rules. The Assembly thinks we are dangerous because we do not calculate cost versus benefit before doing what is right. But your people, the innocent, the defenseless, to them, we are something else entirely. And what is that? We are the people who show up when everyone else walks away." Vance's voice carried a weight of conviction. "We are what happens when tyrants think no one is watching. We are the consequence that bullies never expect." Torvan stepped forward, his ancient face filled with wonder. "Admiral, may I ask you something? Why did humanity answer our call? As the Queen said, we have nothing to offer you. No strategic value, No rare resources, nothing that would benefit your species. Vance was quiet for a long moment. May I tell you a story? Please. 200 years ago, my species nearly destroyed itself. We had wars that killed billions, weapons that poisoned our world, hatred that divided us into 1,000 warring factions. We came within a breath of total extinction, not from aliens or natural disasters, but from our own stupidity and cruelty. She paused, her eyes distant with memory. In the darkest moment of that time, when it seemed like nothing could save us, small groups of people started doing something unexpected. They helped strangers. Not for profit, not for strategy, but simply because helping was the right thing to do. They shared food with enemies, protected refugees from their own governments, risked their lives for people they had never met. Why? Sirith asked. Because when everything else fails, when systems collapse and societies crumble, the only thing that remains is what we choose to do for each other. Vance met her eyes. Those small acts of kindness saved humanity. They reminded us that we could be better than our worst impulses. And when we finally put ourselves back together, we made a promise. Never again would we be bystanders while innocents suffered. You fight for strangers because of something that happened to your own people? We fight for strangers because no one fought for us. Vance's voice grew fierce. When humanity was dying, the galaxy watched and did nothing. The Assembly had the power to help us, but they calculated that we were not worth the risk. So we learned to save ourselves, and we promised that we would never treat others the way we were treated. Sirith felt something fundamental shifting in her understanding. The humans were not monsters or savages, they were survivors. They had emerged from their own darkness with a determination to prevent others from experiencing the same abandonment they had suffered. Admiral, she said slowly, your species gives me hope. Not just for my people, but for the entire galaxy. Vance smiled again. That is the nicest thing anyone has said to me in years, Your Majesty. Now, let us discuss more practical matters. My fleet has secured your system, but the Kethver will eventually return. They do not forgive, and they do not forget. We need to establish defenses, begin reconstruction, and perhaps have a conversation about future relations between our peoples. You would stay? You would help us rebuild? We did not come all this way just to fight one battle and leave. Vance gestured toward the ruined palace. Your world needs help, and helping is what we do. If you will have us, we would be honored to stand with the Velinari as friends and allies. Sirith extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Admiral Vance, the Velinari sovereignty would be honored to call humanity our friends. Vance clasped her hand firmly. Then let us begin. We have a lot of work to do, and I suspect the galaxy is about to become a very interesting place. Above them, the human fleet orbited like protective guardians, their angular ships standing watch over a world that had been saved from extinction. For the first time in weeks, Queen Sirith allowed herself to smile. 6 months had passed since the liberation of Valantos Prime, and the world was slowly healing. Queen Sirith stood in the gardens of her rebuilt palace, watching as Velinari children played among the new crystal fountains. The sound of their laughter was the most beautiful music she had ever heard, proof that her people had survived, that life continued, that hope had been rewarded. The reconstruction had proceeded faster than anyone expected. Human engineers worked alongside Velinari builders, combining alien efficiency with ancient artistry. New cities rose from the ashes, not exact copies of what had been lost, but something different, something stronger. The crystal spires now incorporated human alloys that could withstand orbital bombardment. The power grids used human fusion technology that would never fail. The defenses were armed with weapons that would make any future invader think twice. But the physical reconstruction was only part of the transformation. Something deeper had changed in the Velinari spirit. Before the siege, Her people had been peaceful to the point of passivity. They had trusted the Galactic Assembly to protect them, relied on diplomacy to resolve conflicts, believed that art and culture were sufficient shields against aggression. The Kethver had proven how naive those beliefs had been. Now the Velinari trained alongside human soldiers, learning the arts of war from masters who had perfected combat across millennia of conflict. Young Velinari joined the newly formed defense force, eager to ensure that their world would never again be helpless. They did not abandon their love of art and beauty, but they balanced it with strength. Admiral Vance had become a frequent visitor to the palace, and Cirith had grown to consider her a true friend. Their conversations ranged from military strategy to philosophy to simple exchanges about their favorite foods. The human admiral had a surprising sense of humor beneath her warrior exterior, and she genuinely seemed to enjoy Velinari culture. Today, Vance arrived with news that would change everything once again. "Your Majesty," she said, striding into the garden with her characteristic confidence, "I have received reports from across the sector. It seems your distress call did more than save your world." "What do you mean?" "Other species heard your message. Many of them had been suffering under Kethver oppression for years, but they had never dared to hope for rescue. When they learned what happened here, how you called out to the void and received an answer, they began sending their own messages." Cirith felt her breath catch. "Messages to humanity?" "Dozens of them." Vance's eyes sparkled with something between amusement and determination. The Thralak Collective, the Neeson Confederation, the Free Peoples of Viridian 7, all of them asking for help, all of them desperate, all of them ignored by the civilized galaxy. "And you answered them?" "We are in the process of doing so." Vance smiled. Earth Command has authorized the expansion of the emergency response fleet. We are building new ships, training new crews, establishing forward bases and friendly systems. What happened at Velantos Prime was just the beginning. Cirith walked slowly through the garden, processing this news. The Galactic Assembly will not be pleased. They specifically forbade contact with humanity. The Assembly can lodge all the complaints they want. They had their chance to help these people, and they chose to do nothing. Vance's voice hardened. "We are not going to ask their permission to do the right thing. There will be consequences. The Assembly has power, influence, economic leverage. Let them bring consequences." Vance shrugged. "We have faced worse and survived. And now we are not alone. The Velinari stand with us, and soon others will too. The Assembly rules through fear and calculation, but fear and calculation crumble when people discover they have options." Old Tarvan approached, having listened to the conversation from nearby. "Admiral, may I ask what you hope to achieve?" "If humanity continues on this path, you will make enemies of the great powers. The Kethver will certainly seek revenge, and the Assembly may decide you are too dangerous to tolerate." Vance turned to face him. "Elder Torvan, my species spent thousands of years fighting each other. We invented weapons that could destroy our own world, and we came very close to using them. When we finally achieved unity, it was not through conquest or domination. It was through the recognition that we are all connected, that what happens to one of us affects all of us." She paused, choosing her words carefully. The galaxy is a vast and dangerous place. There are species out there who see others only as resources to be exploited. The Assembly's response to this has been to build walls, maintain balances of power, sacrifice the weak to appease the strong. But that approach does not work, not in the long run. The Kethver proved that at Velantos Prime. "So what is the alternative?" Cirith asked. "Community," Vance said simply. "Not an assembly of great powers calculating their own interests, but a genuine community of peoples who look out for each other. It will not be easy to build, and it will not happen quickly. But it starts with moments like this, with one world calling for help and another answering. Sirith looked up at the sky, where she knew human ships still orbited, maintaining their watchful vigil. You truly believe such a thing is possible? A galaxy where the strong protect the weak instead of preying upon them. I believe it has to be possible. Vance met her gaze. Because the alternative is a galaxy of endless predation, where might makes right, and the innocent exist only at the sufferance of their oppressors. Humanity rejected that vision for ourselves, and we will reject it for the stars as well. In the weeks that followed, news spread across the galaxy with the speed of light and the force of revelation. The Velinari sovereignty had been saved by the humans. The feared quarantine species, the monsters of assembly propaganda, had answered a desperate call and fought a battle against impossible odds. And now they were answering other calls, traveling to other desperate worlds, fighting other impossible battles. Some species reacted with fear, convinced that the humans were embarking on a campaign of conquest disguised as liberation. The Assembly issued warnings, condemning human interference in galactic affairs and calling for sanctions against any world that collaborated with them. But other species saw something different. They saw the Velinari reconstruction, the prisoners of war being treated humanely, the genuine friendship developing between two very different peoples. They saw a species that fought ferociously but did not massacre the defeated. That helped without demanding payment. That kept its promises. Slowly, quietly, the galaxy began to change. The Thralak Collective was liberated from Kethver occupation, and its spider-like inhabitants wept with gratitude. The Nisan Confederation received human ships that broke a blockade imposed by a rival empire. The free peoples of Viridian 7 welcomed human advisors who helped them build defenses that would protect their newly won independence. Each liberation added to the growing network of worlds that stood with humanity. Each rescue created new bonds of friendship and alliance. Each battle sent the same message across the stars. The defenseless were no longer alone. Queen Sirith watched all of this unfold with wonder and hope. Her desperate call into the void had started something far larger than she had ever imagined. A movement, a revolution, a fundamental shift in how the galaxy functioned. The Kethver would return eventually, everyone knew that. The Assembly would continue to scheme and threaten. Other challenges would arise, other dangers would emerge. The path ahead was far from certain. But on Valanthos Prime, in a garden filled with laughter and new growth, a queen stood beside a human admiral and smiled at the future. "Thank you," Sirith said quietly. "Not just for saving my world, but for showing the galaxy what is possible." Admiral Vance clasped her shoulder with a warrior's grip. "Thank you for having the courage to call out when everyone else stayed silent." That courage is what made all of this possible. They stood together as the sun set over the crystal spires, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, other desperate voices were whispering into the void, hoping against hope that someone might hear. And now, finally, someone was listening. The humans had answered one call, and they would answer many more. Not for glory, not for power, not for conquest, but simply because it was right, because it was necessary, because no one should have to face the darkness alone. The galaxy would never be the same again.